Let's rock, baby.
Released in the year 2001, DMC1 had blown the minds of anyone who had laid eyes upon it. I mean, have you even seen the advert for this stuff? It's absolutely insane and amazing at the same time. Up until that point, most third-person action games were designed out along the lines of Onimusha or Resident Evil. With DMC actually being conceived as the next Resident Evil title at the time, the game had strayed so far from Resident Evil's original design that it became an entirely different franchise on its own, and, well, thank God for that. Even in 2020, I enjoyed playing this game on the PlayStation 4, and I must admit, for something this old, it's still pretty impressive and fun. Needless to say, it also has to be one of the most important games in gaming history. Today, I'm probably going to get destroyed for making this video, but I decided to take a look at 5 things that I really hated about Devil May Cry 1. To be honest with you, it was actually difficult to hate many things about this game. It's pretty good. I love it. Amazing. But there are still some things in every good game that will just tick any player off, and well, these are the 5 things that I found to be really annoying. Number 5 on this list, strange enemy placement. It's no secret that DMC1 is unforgiving with its difficulty. The enemies in this game are extremely tough at times and can really catch you by surprise when you are caught off guard. Now, there are numerous instances where you will find yourself fighting against unexpected demons who will make you want to throw your controller out the window. And oh boy, did I have one of those moments towards the latter part of the game. You see, what had happened was towards the start of one of the missions, I came across a room where I had to fight off 2 shadows at the same time. And you couldn't progress unless you actually defeat these enemies, which was even worse actually. And what had happened was I obviously died. So I then restarted the entire mission all over again, prepared myself for the fight by purchasing the necessary items and getting the necessary upgrades to give myself a better of a fighting chance. But when I got back to the room, there was a completely different enemy there, and there was only one of them. So for some reason, the game either picked up that I wasn't good enough to fight 2 shadows at the same time, or it just randomly spits out enemies to just test your luck and push you to the point where you're either going to, well, succeed or just die of frustration. Number 4 on this list, yellow orbs. When a player dies, they can revive at the previous checkpoint by using a yellow orb, which isn't optional. As long as you've got one, it's automatically spent upon your death. This was frustrating when you died near the start of a mission, and worse if you used up any consumable items, because you see, when you respawned at the previous checkpoint, you wouldn't get those items back. It wasn't technically a redo over. The best thing you could do was actually restart the entire mission, which kind of defeats the purpose of having a yellow orb. Well, at least on the normal difficulty. On higher difficulties, I didn't really see any benefit to it either, because you need all the items that you have in order to progress in some cases. Either way, yellow orbs for me were completely useless. Number 3 on this list was the horror atmosphere. Now, we get it. This was meant to be a Resident Evil title, and it eventually became an action game called Devil May Cry afterwards. But there was so much of Resident Evil left behind in there that I guess it was sometimes difficult for players, especially myself, to actually differentiate whether this was going to be an action game or a horror game. Because there are certain times where you can just pick up that this was definitely not meant to be an action game. There are certain places where you go through like corridors at night where the lights are off and the eerie music and sound effects in the background that just feel completely out of place. It feels out of character with the rest of the game. Fortunately, this was fixed up in later series, but I didn't enjoy that aspect of Devil May Cry 1. Don't get me wrong, it does, in my opinion, add to the charm of the whole Devil Hunter vibe. I mean, it's not supposed to be a pleasant and enjoyable experience, especially when you're fighting off against hordes of the underworld. But at the same time, it kind of takes the player out of the atmosphere of being an action game into that of being a horror game, which can confuse some people. And honestly, I didn't really like that at all. Number 2. The underwater levels. There's something about the early 2000s and underwater levels that developers for some reason at that point in time couldn't help push into a game. With DMC1, this has got to be one of the best examples of how not to make an underwater level. Not only are these levels completely different from the rest of the game by switching the player to a first-person view, they also completely take you out of what you thought would be an action game to a really terrible underwater simulator. Enemies can attack you while all you can do is shoot them with a needle gun. That is basically a joke. What's worse is that this is the only way to attack. There's no other option. You can either slow on by them, try to dodge them and escape, or you could fight them off with a needle gun. Now, going back to the issue of rare orbs, because you are doing this on your first playthrough, you want to get as much rare orbs as possible, especially when you are on the lower difficulty, because your next playthrough is going to be on the higher difficulty, and by then you need to have as many items and be as upgraded as possible. Anyway, all of Dante's moves are disabled, and he can't even attack with his sword. He can't even activate his devil trigger. I guess somehow water seems to be the devil trigger's weakness. It's strange, but it was in the game. Number 1 on this list was the final boss fight with Mundus. Now, for the ruler of the underworld, I must admit, I was extremely disappointed with this one. To be honest, it was more of a tragedy than anything else, and I'm also starting to wonder if Sparta was as legendary as the tales say he is, due to the fact that Mundus was actually easier to beat than Nightmare and Shadow. What's really bad about this though is that the first part of this fight takes a player onto an on-rails shooter, which is once again completely different from the rest of the game like the underwater levels. The easiest way to defeat Mundus is to use your devil trigger, which can actually be activated easier if you've got devil stars in your inventory. You just replenish your devil meter with that, activate devil trigger, and he's defeated in a matter of seconds. Then the second part of it wasn't as bad. It involved a lot of platforming, getting in close, activating your devil trigger, attacking, doing damage, then avoiding any incoming attacks that are on the arena, and then repeating the process over and over again. There's also this occasional fire dragon that comes out of the lava, which I thought was pretty cool, and I didn't mind actually fighting off against it, because it gave you a green orb every time you defeated it. Well, that was in the normal difficulty. The third part of the fight, however, on the other hand, is just strange. You fight Mundus in a sewer. You just gotta basically keep mashing the melee attack button till Trish comes in. Then you just gotta shoot him until you fill up your devil trigger, and then activate your devil trigger to trigger a cutscene, which then, well, results in Mundus actually dying. The entire fight was somewhat underwhelming. For the rule of the underworld, I expected a lot more. In fact, I expected a lot worse. Be that as it may, it wasn't the best boss fight to end the game, and I wish that Devil May Cry 1 had a better final boss. That brings us to the end of this video. Making it was painful. Despite everything that I mentioned, I must admit I still love this game and will still recommend it to anyone who hasn't played it as yet. With that being said, don't forget to leave a like and let us know what you think in the comment section below. If you enjoy gaming videos, then consider subscribing, turn on that bell notification, and until next time, goodbye.